Last Friday, 21 Pilots released a music video entitled City Walls, and this is for their song, City Walls, which opens their latest album, Breach, and also includes the closer from that album, the song Intentions. And this music video wraps up a decade-plus long story that they began telling back in 2017 with the music video for Heavy Dirty Soul. Now, this video begins in the midst of the Battle of Paladin Strait. We saw this battle begin in the music video for Paladin Strait off of Clancy back in 2024. But now, the battle is continuing and coming to an end. And what's interesting about this music video is it actually starts right where Paladin Strait left off and takes place at the same time that the events of the contract are occurring inside Clancy's head. So as the Torchbearer and the Banditos are running to the city and through the streets and up the tower, Clancy is stuck inside the void surrounded by the glowing eyes. And then right at the end of that music video, he opens his eyes and we see that moment in this music video, but it's well into the video when that actually takes place. Now, I'm sure you've all seen the video at this point, so I'm not going to waste your time walking through the entirety of it, but there are some key moments here to highlight in order to gain a better understanding of what is really going on here, both from the perspective of situating this within the lore as a whole, and then also from a narrative perspective, just looking at this video itself, because quite a lot happens over the course of this 9-minute video. As Clancy and Nico are battling it out in the tower, Clancy keeps being sent into these flashback moments, and it's a little hard at first to understand exactly what's going on here. It's certainly something which confused me the first few times that I watched it, and which I still don't have 100% certainty about, but I do have some theories about what we're seeing and why we're seeing these particular moments. Because there are basically two escape attempts being depicted here. We see Jumpsuit, Heavy Dirty Soul, and Levitate all shown, or at least the events of those music videos all shown in these flashbacks. And what's interesting is that Heavy Dirty Soul and Jumpsuit, according to the lore that we've seen so far, are linked together as one singular escape attempt, whereas Levitate is a second escape that took place after that. So it's interesting the order in which they show these, right? It starts with a flashback to Heavy Dirty Soul, which is obviously the start of the lore from a visual perspective, but then we go into Levitate, and then back into Jumpsuit. So it kind of jumps back and forth between the first attempt and the second attempt that we saw depicted throughout these music videos. There is also another key difference with Levitate, as I'm sure you saw. Clancy's neck is not covered in black paint in that one. It is in Heavy Dirty Soul and Jumpsuit, and it's interesting that it is in Jumpsuit as well, and we'll get into that in a moment. But it isn't in Levitate, and that's because up until the point at which Nico arrives in the Bandito camp, Levitate was actually a successful escape. He made it to the Banditos, he made it out of Dima and all the way to the Bandito camp, had joined them. They taught him their colors, and he became one of them, and yet Nico still came into the camp and brought him back. Which is interesting given what we saw laid out in the I Am Torchbearer video, which came out a few days before this music video, in which the Torchbearer tells us that those who are Banditos are banished and not allowed to return to the city. But Clancy is an exception once again. But back to Heavy Dirty Soul. Here, Clancy is thrown back in time to that moment when the car catches on fire and then explodes. But there are some differences here. Obviously, this is something of a memory, and it also seems to be a memory that is controlled by Nico. We don't see the Torchbearer here, even though he was there in the original music video, and his drum set is there, but he's missing, and Nico is there. Then he goes back into the tower and then is thrust into Levitate. And we talked about that a second ago, but another thing that's important to note is that everyone is frozen in time. But Nico is there once again, moving through the camp towards Clancy, an inevitable force that Clancy turns and tries to run from. They battle it out again in the tower, and this time he is thrust onto his back in the river in Jumpsuit. But this is a very different Jumpsuit than we've seen before. The events of Jumpsuit in that music video took place during the day, and Clancy's neck was not smeared when he woke up in that river. There was no paint on his neck and hands until later in the video when Nico shows up and smears him. In fact, it is in that video that we first learned where that black paint came from, what smearing is. It is nighttime and there are no Banditos and no Torchbearer. Clancy is alone, abandoned by his friends and the sun, with only Nico there, chasing him down once more on a white horse. So each of these three flashbacks has something somewhat off about them. Heavy Dirty Soul, Nico is there and there's no Torchbearer. Levitate, everything is frozen in time. And Jumpsuit, it is nighttime, the Banditos and the Torchbearer are not there. Partly if we're operating under the assumption that these are sort of contrived memories that Nico is casting Clancy into and is fully in control of. These aren't actually Clancy's real memories, these are kind of projections that Nico's forming in his mind. to intimidate him, to make him feel like he's alone, abandoned by all his friends. But the other thing that I think is the kind of the key point here, the reason why we keep seeing Nico showing up just walking calmly towards Clancy in each of these flashbacks, is to show that no matter how well thought out these escape attempts were, no matter how far Clancy thought he was getting away from Dima, Nico always knew exactly where he was, and was always ready to find him and bring him back. Clancy never truly escaped in any of these instances. Then, as referenced in the song Jumpsuit, Nico grabs him by the throat, lifts him in the air, and throws him hard against the wall of the tower. Clancy tries to fight back, as he has been this entire time, tries to fight back against a more powerful force, and Nico uses his own weapons against him, stabbing into his chest with the antlers. And this really speaks to the fact that these tools, the tools of seizing, of psychokinesis, would always be his undoing, ever since he took them from Ned on the island of Voltsoy, as we saw in The Outside. He took these tools, these antlers that harnessed this dark power. Rather than waiting for the torchbearer to arrive, he trusted in the power of psychokinesis instead, and thus he lost. As this happens, each of the attempts seen in those different flashbacks stops running away from Nico. They know it is hopeless. There is no escape. The only way forward is to turn and face their enemy, their demons. And it's interesting, again, that they chose these particular moments to have as the flashbacks, and why they chose Heavy Dirty Soul here. Because having Nico there, and having Clancy stop running from Nico in the Heavy Dirty Soul scene, seems to imply that even from the start of this cycle of Clancy, he knew that there wasn't going to be any escape. He knew that it was inevitable that at the end, he would have to come face to face with Nico and have to become him, have to become a bishop. This attempt was doomed from the start. And there's something that we see time and again throughout the music videos, especially the ones referenced here, that really speaks to this. There's almost a feeling that Clancy is letting himself get recaptured every time. Now, we don't see him recaptured in Heavy Dirty Soul, but Heavy Dirty Soul and Jumpsuit are very closely linked, and we see scenes that are supposed to be happening right where Heavy Dirty Soul happened in the music video for Jumpsuit. So it's basically clear that after the morning after Heavy Dirty Soul, he goes into Trench and then goes through the events of Jumpsuit. And in the music video for Jumpsuit, Nico finds him. And initially, he doesn't run away. He stands there and he lets himself be smeared. He stands there calmly. He sings a bridge that says, "If you need anyone, grab me by the throat and lift me in the air." And then, in the music video for Levitate, something similar happens. Now, Nico does kind of sneak up on him, grabbing him from behind, but he's in the middle of a crowded camp of banditos and yet does nothing to struggle or cry out for help. Nico would be surrounded by the banditos if they chose to fight and try to free him. But back in the tower, Nico then takes those horns, which he just used to stab Clancy, and he breaks them. And this is an interesting moment to have him break the horns, the antlers. I think in large part he's doing this simply so that his enemies, the rebels, can't have this weapon, this power anymore. The tool that they were using to harness it has been destroyed. They can't use psychokinesis against him. But another interpretation of this is that the antlers have served their purpose, and Nico knows it. Stabbing Clancy with the antlers in some way put that power inside him. We never see the bishops using antlers to seize or smear people, and in fact, when they're fighting in the tower, Clancy has to use the antlers, but Nico has the same force in his hands, in his body. He has this power within him, this dark, mysterious, kind of sinister and evil power. And so he, by stabbing Clancy, infuses him with that power. It is that moment in which he is stabbed that there is no turning back. Clancy now must become a bishop. In fact, he's already been turned into a bishop at that point. And by doing this, Nico knew that his own time had come. His tenure as a bishop had run its course, and Clancy was here to take his place. And he was just ensuring the inevitable by stabbing Clancy. Then, moments later, we see Clancy using some kind of power, whether or not it's this or something else, but without the antlers. He destroys Nico, turns him into dust, into ash, along with all the other bishops whose corpses were previously lying strewn across the floor. Then, as the torchbearer and the banditos enter the tower, Clancy tears down the curtains in a way that is very reminiscent of the song Not Today. He uses this to create a bishop robe for himself and begins to distribute the other ones to the other banditos, but the torchbearer refuses to take one. Then the torchbearer and another bandito, who I will presume is Elliot, although I suppose we'll never know for sure, gather their things and set out to find a new Clancy. And this video certainly seems to end on a note of defeat. The torchbearer is sad that Clancy became Nico, but he is hopeful, because there is another one out there. They will try again, and one day, it seems, they will succeed. But this final scene, and a couple of other things throughout this video, and really other elements of Breach, have got me thinking, was this that we see in City Walls the plan all along? With that being said, thank you so much for watching. Tomorrow I will be releasing a video doing a breakdown of Drag Path and the potential alternate ending to this story, which I think that song hints at. If you'd like to see that or any other music commentary and reviews, make sure to subscribe, and don't forget to comment your own thoughts on this video below.